I am so excited to be talking today with one of my favorite people in my HR circle that only crosses the border to that TSUN, that state up north for me, which is the greatest honor ever. And I am talking to Christie Engler this morning. Good morning, Christie. How is your day going?
Good morning, my friend. Great so far. Great so
That's
far.
good. The day is early, so just so everybody knows, this is a morning, so we may or may not have morning coffee to power our HR days. But Christie you are such an amazing ambassador, especially for the HR department of one or small business HR. And you've been such an advocate and an ally for those of us that have worked in those environments, because working in small business is completely different environment than working in what we deem big old corporate. So thank you for being an advocate and an ally and a voice for others, which is about 60 to 70% of our profession, by the way. So appreciate you and all you do for all of us in the HR community. For those that didn't figure out, Christie is from the great state of Ohio, which is below Michigan. So I don't mean that as a knock. It's just geographically below Michigan. So when she has to come up north to cross the border, there usually is an alert. Michigan State Police doesn't usually have an alert when Christie is crossing the border. Just kidding. Anyway, Christie,
Great.
very excited for our conversation today. So the question we ask everybody in our HRUnite community that comes on for these conversations is tell us about your HR story. We really want to learn a little bit more about you and what led you to become a steward of people.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm always happy to talk shop, as you know, but I'm also always happy to talk to you. So whatever topic we decide. So this is a twofer for me today, which I'm super excited about. So, man, the story that led you here, right? So when I was 3 years old, I went around and told everybody I was going to be the president of the United States. That was my future ambition. Then I decided, okay, before that, I should probably do something. So I'm going to be a lawyer. So I'm like 5 going around telling everybody that I'm going to be a lawyer. I don't know anything about what a lawyer is or does, but it sounds great, right? That takes me actually all the way through high school graduation. I went to The Ohio State University, entered as a political science major with every intention of going to law school. I did not take college as seriously as I should have, and that's been the one of the biggest pieces of advice as I dropped my daughter off last week is take it seriously and actually go there for the intended purpose and go to class and not just worry about having fun all the time. So I didn't do that. And when I was a junior in my arts and sciences college, they opened up a minor in business for arts and sciences students. And it was fairly short, just a handful of classes. And I'm like, okay, this sounds really interesting and I'd like to do it. So one of the first courses that I took was an introduction to HR. And it was just a good old fashioned HR 101, everything through the employee life cycle. Here's what human resources does. And I can actually physically remember sitting in that classroom in Schoenbaum Hall on Ohio State's campus, which I pass on a regular basis now. And it just clicked for me. I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is really cool. This area is very interesting. And it really vibed for me. And so fast track, I finished my political science degree because I was so far into it, it didn't make sense to change at that point. But instead of law school, I went and got a master's in HR and pursued that. And then in 2005, got my first real HR job working for a PEO. So that's really how I got here and kind of what led me to this wonderful profession that we're in.
a wonderful story, and you hear my four-legged interns commenting about how much they love that story. It's inspiring. So Dalton and Tessa are like, wow, maybe we should take that journey. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I do have the rowdy interns. It wouldn't be a conversation with any HR pro without rowdy Dalton and Tessa. So it's kind of funny that or the irony, not hilarious, but maybe it is, that many of us in HR fell into it because a door opened. And so for you, that epiphany was that door opening to that additional minor. And oftentimes, I'm an advocate of sometimes exploring. Sometimes we don't know what we want to do until we have that opportunity to explore or test drive it. And so I want to celebrate and thank the College of Arts and Sciences at The Ohio State University for opening up the door for you, because we are grateful as an HR community that that door did open. So on that note, so you explored, you started working in PEOs. Was there any moment that shaped your HR career, or had the most impact or influence that you can think of? Like one moment outside of that, hey, I'm going to get a nudge with that minor opportunity.
So once I was actually in it, and I actually started out in unemployment, like processing unemployment claims on the employer side, in the PEO. And so that was extremely interesting. And I learned a lot through all of that. I think one of the most significant moments came a handful of years later when I was dealing with a client. Their sole business is creating and installing bathrooms. And they had a gentleman who worked there, and he had worked there for a very long time. And this man was, first of all, extremely talented with his hands and able to do things that I can't even begin to fathom. I mean, I walk into Home Depot and start sweating. Like, I know I don't belong there. It is not my thing. And they know it too. Everybody in there knows that I don't belong in there. This guy could, create things and install things, and he made rooms beautiful, and he made people's bathrooms amazing. He unfortunately sustained a pretty significant injury on the job. And through the process, it was actually determined that he wasn't coming back to work. And his doctor said, you're done with this kind of work, this physical, very demanding, heavy labor job. And I will never forget, Tina-Marie, I'm on the phone with him and a representative from our workers' comp bureau and our managed care organization. And this gentleman, who's well into his 60s, is sobbing and just kind of flipping out, quite frankly, that he's never going to be able to do this again. And, everybody is trying to be very compassionate and trying to, hey, we can help you, find something else. Now, this is a person in their 60s. How many people in their 60s want to turn course, right, and start doing another job and learn a whole new craft or profession? And it was really heart-wrenching, and I'll never forget the sound of his voice over the phone. And I knew him. I'd worked with them for several years. And he was just a wonderful gentleman, just such a gracious man. And this was just really unfortunate. This really, really stunk that he was in this position. But I will never forget feeling, how grateful and blessed I was to be a part of that in that moment, and that I was going to get to hopefully help this gentleman through, this kind of next part of his career journey in his life. And just how awesome it is that HR gets to be a part of these kinds of things, even when it's terrible, right? This is a terrible, terrible thing, but that we have so much opportunity to help and to help the employer, and, let's figure out what else we can have him do. And, and so it was a process, but I was just grateful to be there in that moment, but then also just a very big realization for what HR gets to do and gets to be a part of in people's work lives. It was actually pretty cool.
You just brought up a really good point that we, in our capacity as HR pros, will see employees at the best of times and the worst of times. And how we treat them as people is critical. We shouldn't treat them any different if it's a great news that we're sharing or if we're helping them navigate a difficult situation like you just described. And that's handling it with empathy and compassion and kind of meeting them where they're at, because it's life-changing. This person, through the act of performing their job, was injured, maybe through no fault of their own. And so now their life is completely different and will never be the same. And so I want to celebrate that moment with you, that compassionate moment. And sometimes they say, we talk about doctors, like doctors don't have any patient bedside manner until they become a patient themselves. For us as stewards of people, sometimes I think we have to go through an experience to understand the impacts for us to be better stewards of people, regardless if it's happening to us directly or not. So thank you. I'm celebrating that story, and thank you for sharing. And I'm sure it's resonating with a lot of us who've been in those situations, that the work we do holistically impacts every aspect of a person, including us. So one question I want to share, this is conversations with connections. And connections are so important. Is there anybody in the HR community that you want to give a shout out to?
Oh, girl, we could be here all day.
I know, I'm going to say just one. Our attention
be here
span
all
is
day.
short.
So many people. Back in 2017, and I was in a position that was pretty boring, to be honest. And I found myself with time on my hands, in an HRBP role that just was not very demanding. And that was really when I started doing other things. I started reading, my HR magazine cover to cover. I started exploring the worlds of social media as it related to HR, LinkedIn, Twitter. That's how I found such a wonderful community of people. And one of the first people that I met through all of that was John Thurman, who was the previous host of the HR Social Hour, the podcast. And he really just took me under his wing, introduced me to everybody and anybody. And, friend, I think through all of that is how you and I, got to meet and got to be friends. And it's just, it just spiraled from there. And John also, as I started exploring becoming a speaker, he had some words of wisdom for me as well. He had been there, he had done a lot of that. He really helped me navigate, that process, and said, you don't have to go broke, you don't have to sell your soul to become a speaker. He really, he's a very pragmatic, individual, and we are good friends to this day. And so John was a huge piece of kind of getting me into the bigger scope of, outside of my own geographic region, outside of my own industry, and said, hey, there's a whole HR world out here, and, come join us. And I'm so grateful for all of that, because the people that I have met, like Miss Ma'am here, truly life changing, not just as, HR connections, but friends, and, friends on all levels. And it's just been absolutely fantastic. So I'm grateful to John and to what he did, and kind of getting me into this world and introducing me to all these wonderful people.
And for those that know, obviously, John is an incredible human. And he is one of my favorite people as well. But he is a phenomenal TA pro, like one of the best as far as the whole employee experience and what he does in our profession, outside of being just one of the kindest, nicest people you will meet on this planet. And he has connected so many of us. So we want to encourage you to connect not just with Christie, but with John. So at the end of this conversation, you're going to see a slide. It's going to have a QR code of how you connect connect with both Christie, and we're going to give a special shout out to John. And so I'm happy to shine the spotlight on John, and grateful for the support, and not surprised. That's just who he is. He's such a curator of connections for the real meaningful impact of that. So thank you, Christie, for sharing your time and conversation with us today, and for shining the spotlight on John Thurmond. And we are so grateful to have you in our HR community and for all you do. And thank you, John, for nudging Christie to speak, because Christie has had an impact on so many of us that live in the world of small to medium size or HR department of one. So have a fabulous rest of your day, Christie. Thank you for making ours. And we look forward to celebrating you and others in the future.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.